Hey everyone, welcome to the Kenco Fishing Show. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about how to hand inject plastics. Got a great episode for you. I think you're going to learn a lot, and hopefully you will subscribe, like us, comment, and check out some of our other stuff. So for today's episode, we're going to be talking about hand injecting soft plastics. This video is going to be specific to hand injecting. If you're thinking about hand pouring, that's in one of our other videos. Pop over and check that out. So here we go. So we're going to first go over the safety equipment and we'll work our way through everything else. One of the first things you'll need is a respirator. Organic vapor, you can get these at Walmart or Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever your hardware store is in your area. Some hot mill gloves. These you can get from your supplier for your plastisols and stuff. You could probably find something similar again at a Home Depot, Lowe's, or what have you. All right, so that's it for safety. Some eye protection is recommended, but it's not a necessity, but again, recommended. So then you're gonna need some plastisol. Now plastisol starts as a white milky liquid. As we heat it up, it's gonna turn to a clearer liquid. And then you put your colors and your flakes and stuff in beforehand. So we got black flake today, and we're going to be using a green pumpkin colorant. So you're going to need colorant and flake. You'll need an injector. There's a lot of good companies out there for this stuff. This one is a bass tackle injector. I find that those are very well made and fairly inexpensive in terms of the quality. And you'll need an injection mold. Now, not all molds are injection molds, so you have to make sure you get the right kind. So today we're going to be shooting the Kenco hammer sticks in the 10.5-inch variety. They're very big. So we will go over that stuff and kind of a few tips and tricks here in just a second once we get over to the workbench. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to get spun around, we're going to get the plastisol heating up in the microwave. You will need some way to heat your plastisol. Smaller quantities in a microwave is fine, but you will have to use that microwave only for plastisol once you start cooking plastisol in it. So you'll have to have a microwave not used for food. So let's go ahead, we'll get spun around, we'll get over there to the workbench, and we will get going on what we're doing. So let's go ahead and we'll pop this in for a few minutes. Some of the helpful things that you'll find here is measuring spoons. Simple stuff, but will be very helpful in the long run to get your flake. I always recommend a box of shop rags or white rags, whatever you want to call them. Just something to wipe stuff down. A thing of Clorox wipes. They help clean the surfaces that you're going to be working on and everything. And I also recommend a box of nitrile disposable gloves. The 3mm is totally fine. You can get thicker ones, but it's just not necessary. All we're doing with these is trying to keep the plastisols off our hands and from seeping into our skin. But these are not a necessity. A couple other things here I meant to show you. We have worm oil, which is here, and heat stabilizer. Now these two things are not a necessity, but helpful if you're going to be cooking stuff in the microwave. And especially if you're going to be heating things more than once. If you're going to heat it 2, 3, 4, 5 times to get what you need, you'll probably want to invest in some heat stabilizer. Now, this here is a gem and diamond scale. Again, not a necessity. A lot of people use their colorant and they count drops. So a scale is not a necessity. We will get another video up here in the very near future about how to weigh out colors. All right, so we've got that warmed up. We are going to take and put that in for its last minute here, while we get our colorant mixed up. You'll want to make sure that you mix this stuff very good. We're going to go ahead and put this in here. Gonna dump that right in. Get it all off the thing here. And like I said, this may look a little foreign, but what a lot of people do to count is they just do drops. So we'll get, 1 drop, 2 drops, however many they want. And that's something you'll have to work out on your own. And we're just going to stir that in real good here in just a second. Then another nice piece of equipment to have is a vacuum chamber, or a degasser, some people might call it. Now we are going to add some salt to this here in just a second. So what I'm doing behind you guys, which you cannot see, is I'm getting some salt. So we've got our salt. Now salt is not a necessity. I happen to be doing stick baits for this video, so we're going to put salt in them. We're going to give that a stir. Now you can put your salt in before or after. It doesn't matter as long as you keep it stirred after you get going. All right, we're going to go ahead and pop that in the degasser real quick. And that'll take a minute or two to get all the micro bubbles out of your plastic. Now some plastisols have more micro bubbles, some have less. It just depends on the brand that you use. And there are a bunch of brands out there, so go ahead and experiment with them all. Check them out and see what you can come up with. One thing, guys, you'll want to be wary of is people out there saying, well, this is the best plastisol, that's the best plastisol, this is better, that's better. What really works better is what works better for you. So try a few different brands, figure out what you like, and then use that brand the most, because that's going to be what is best suited for how you do things and the climate that you might be in. So that's just a quick tip. Work with a few different companies and see what works best for you, and then go with that brand. All right, let's go back to, you can see the orange rim down there, that's the degasser. Now some of these molds will come with screws in them. You just tighten them up. This happens to be a mold that we have to clamp with clamps. I recommend the DeWalt clamps or Irving clamps. You really don't want to go and buy cheap clamps at the dollar store. You want something that's going to be able to put some pressure on that mold to keep it together. And you're just going to clamp it tight. We'll move these things out of the way. All right, we're going to get our plastisol. So you can see here we've got de-aired plastic. There's no little micro bubbles. The salt has settled to the bottom, so we got to stir it up again. The reason I add my salt before is because at times you'll get moisture in your salt, and it's imperative that you keep moisture out of your plastic or it will bubble. So you still saw that it was kind of that milky green color. So we're not quite there yet. So that's going to change as it catalyzes, and then we'll add our flake after it's catalyzed, after it's all warmed up. I do that because putting the flake in before just exposes it to additional heat that we really don't need to expose it to. All right, so we're still You guys can see here, we're still at the milky green stage, so we need to stir it again. And we're going to pop that back in for a bit. We'll give it a couple minutes. We're getting low here. We're getting low on the flake. We got to get some more. So one of the brands I use a lot is called Lureworks. You can get all your plastisol, your flake, and all that stuff there. They do a really good job. It's pretty good plastic. There's other companies out there, Dead On Plastic, Polysol. There's a bunch. So you check around, see what works best for you, and then go with that one. In the meantime, let me, I'll show you about your injector. So the bass tackle injector has a top. There's a nice little ring here, or a little pip point that locks into your injector. And why that's important is so you don't shoot the top off. If that's not there and you go to shoot, you'll lose the top. So make sure you get an injector with a locking pin. Doesn't necessarily have to be bass tackle, but they do make a good injector. Then the top half will screw out for you so that you can clean it when it's time to clean, and screws back in. Then you got your plunger, and inside you have your O-ring. So what you want to make sure of with your O-ring is that you keep it oiled. That's where the worm oil comes in. So we're just going to give it a little drizzle around that O-ring. Just enough to lubricate it. And then it helps in the injector. All right. So we got our plastic here. We've been on another 2 minutes. We're still at the milky stage, so we're still not hot enough. Now this plastic has to get to somewhere around 350 degrees to make its change from plastisol to plastic. So we're going to give it another couple minutes. Oh, and the other thing too, not all flake is the same. Some flake is craft flake and glitter. Craft glitter is what we'll call it. And it's really not recommended for this application. This material is a solvent resistant higher temperature glitter. So it's a little more expensive than your basic craft glitters. But that's what you really should be trying to shoot for when you're doing this, because that's really what works best. So for these particular baits, we're going to be using a much larger injector. So again, it's the same concept. I'm going to take and oil the O-rings up. This one has a double O-ring. Because these baits are so large, they really require a lot more plastic, so we use the larger injector. So we'll get our hot gloves on here. All right, so that's good. So you can see here now, we've gone from that milky white, you can still see some of the milky white in there, and more of that clearer color green in the top there. So we're going to stir that up, get our salt suspended again. And you just want to stir it easily and gently and consistently. You don't want to whip it. You'll put, if you start whipping it, you'll put air into it, and you don't want to do that. So we'll give that another couple minutes and we should be good to go. We're gonna turn our fan on here. One of the things that you're gonna want if you decide to do this is a very good a very good ventilation system. So you really want to make sure that you're getting the fumes from your plastisol out, or you have a respirator on. This is definitely not an activity you want to be doing inside your house. So take it outside in the garage or just outside on the porch or what have you, a shed, away from the kids. One of the things that about your plastisol is it will burn your fingers if you get it on you. It will melt the skin right off. So it's very important you don't get it around kids or animals that might jump on the counter. All right, so we've been in for about a minute. We're starting to get to that goopy plastic stage, so we're getting closer. I'm gonna get back in, give it about another minute and a half. All right, so we're coming down to our last 10 seconds here. Let's see how we look once we get this out. So you can see now we've really started to make that transition to plastic, that goopy kind of. We're still not up to temp yet because it's not flowing nice and clean. And I'll show you what that looks like once we get there. See how it's still very thick? So we're going to give that another couple minutes, and then we should be ready at that point. All right, so here we are again. We're starting to really get that nice, thin, running plastic. So we're pretty much ready to start going. We got to make sure we get all the salt off the bottom. And again, I'm not whipping it. It may look like it's going pretty fast, but we're not whipping it. We're just looking for salt concentration, which looks really good. We're going to get some flake in there. And incorporate that flake into it. Alright, I like that. That looks pretty good. Alright, so our first shot, we're going to go in the plastic. We're going to pull up a little bit and burp the injector. There'll be a little air pocket when we first pull up. So we're going to get rid of that air pocket. Then we'll draw up what we need to shoot. I'm going to give it a stir while we're in there. Pull up a little bit. Get rid of the little air pocket. Give it a burp. And we're going to pull up everything we need. We're going to come up. We're going to start letting that go in. Nice and slow, steady, even pressure. And once you get to the full spot, you're just going to hold light pressure on it for just a little bit, depending on the size of the mold. This is a pretty big one, so we got to give it a second. And then take it off, top off your sprue. The sprue is the very top part. We're going to give it another mix. We're going to go back for another shot to fill this other side. Same process. We're going to hold some pressure on it for a second. We're going to let it up, fill that sprue, and put the rest of our plastic back in the cup. Now there'll be a plug inside here and the stuff that's on the outside. So once it cools, you can just peel it off, peel it right off, and just let it sit on the counter for now. And we'll come back to that when we do a remelt. put our plastisol back in the microwave, or some guys prefer a heating plate. It's not necessary, but we'll just put it in the microwave so it's out of the way and we don't spill it. Then you'll have to wait a short time for this to set up. In this case, it'll be a little longer because we have such big baits in here. So it'll take it a little bit longer than your traditional smaller bait. Look, we're on candid camera, right up here in the corner. I run the camera with my phone app, so I keep it close by so I can see kind of where it's at. All right, let's take a look. We'll unclamp it. Now, one of the things that will happen as you shoot, these molds will become extremely hot. So that's why the gloves are really important in a little bit. Not to mention your injector is going to get really warm. So let's go ahead and we'll open this up. Now, we may have had good full pours, we may not have. But it looks as though we did, so. And that's going to be your product. You can see those are still very soft, so we're going to have to give those a second to set up. These are a 10.5-inch worm, so they're much bigger than the normal, worm that you might use. All right, so for your plug in your nozzle, you're going to take that off. You can just push it out. It's a little harder with this big injector because it's. Ooh, that's hot. So you can see the plug that we got in the top of that. Now, most injectors won't have that big of a plug, but because this one is so big, it tends to have a big plug the first few times, until it warms up. Then that'll go away. And just check it, make sure it's going good. All right, those are good enough that we can pull them out, I think. We're just going to lay them out back here. We're going to give our plastic a little bit of, probably a minute or so to reheat it, while we get everything clamped back together. And then we're ready to shoot our next run. Now, because we got salt in here, we got to get it all stirred back up real good and resuspended. Make sure we get it all off the bottom. Then we're gonna give it a stir. Same thing, little plastic, give it a burp. And then suck up what you're gonna use. All the way down. Let it get a little bit of pressure on it again for just a second. Top your sprue off. And then hold a little pressure. And then top your sprues off. And that's just all you're doing is adding a little bit of plastic to them. In one of our upcoming videos, we'll go over mold mechanics and how they work, so that you can understand why we're topping those off. In fact, if you wait, and you'll be able to see, as the plastic cools, it condenses in, so it sucks plastic down into the mold from this cavity up here. All right, guys, so that's pretty much it. That's the basics of hand injecting soft plastics. I hope that was informative for you. I hope you understood everything we went over. Feel free to comment down below, give us a like, a subscribe, and we hope to see you on our next videos. Like I said, we got a mold mechanics video coming up, and a few other things coming up. We're also starting the Fishing Maine series. We also have a couple videos up on that, I think right now, maybe one or two, I can't remember. But that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to travel all around the state, fishing different things, different species. So we hope to see you tune in for that. But hit subscribe, give us a like, and comment below. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.